All right. So today we're going to talk all about relationships. Yes, this is still the Keep What You Earn podcast. We're going to be talking about relationships today. And no, I'm not talking about romantic relationships. I'm talking about relationships in your business between you and the folks that work for you. So we're going to talk about employees and contractors. And let me explain what each one is for those who don't know. And you may learn something new. Even if you think you know, you might learn something new about each one right here. So think about a contractor like hiring another business to do services for you. You probably don't think much of it, but if you're hiring someone or outsourcing certain functions to do social media management, maybe you have a VA, maybe you're hiring an accountant, right? Maybe you're hiring a coach. You're usually hiring a contractor, which is another business owner running their own business to provide you these services. And a contractor is typically a person that you hire to do project-based work for a set period of time. They would bill you for their work because you're their customer. And you would be responsible for collecting a W-9 from the contractor when you hire them. And you'd be responsible for sending them a 1099 after the year end to report what you paid them. And here's a really important pro tip. Always collect that W-9 from anyone you hire as an independent contractor, anyone, because that W-9 will tell you it has secrets in there that your accountant can read that will tell you if you are going to be needing to send them a 1099 after year end, but you need to collect the W-9 to find out. So definitely always get a copy of that W-9 when you hire a contractor. It will just save so many headaches in January. So trust me on that. Make a note to go do that if you haven't done that this year. Now, let's talk about your employees, right? So if you have employees, they're typically assumed to have a long-term relationship with you. They provide essential services to your business usually that drive your business. What do I mean by that? The essential services. I mean, like, let's say you run a spin studio, right? Now, an employee would probably be the spin instructor because they offer the core service. What is your business without the instructors if you're running a spin studio, right? Like, what are you offering? They are the core delivery mechanism of that service. And that would be essential to the business. That is one factor we consider, and we'll get into that, but that would probably most likely be an employee relationship. And let's contrast it. If you're running a spin studio, a very obvious contractor relationship would be the janitorial staff. That is not an essential service. That is a supplementary service that you hire someone else to come in and do. You see how that can work and how that might be different. So employees are presumed to have a long-term relationship or perpetual relationship. It's not project-based. It's just assumed that you're hired and then you will stay until you're fired or quit or terminate the relationship. Now, employees are paid through payroll, and the employer is responsible for withholding their taxes through payroll if they elect to do that. And they're responsible as the employer to pay payroll taxes for the employee. You as the employer would be responsible for giving them a W-2 at the end of the year. And I know if you're listening, you're probably thinking, well, I've received a W-2 before, I've received a 1099 before. Now you understand why those different pieces of paperwork were arriving to you based on the relationship you had with where you worked. And honestly, even if you understand the differences between these two things, as a business owner, it can still be really tough to classify someone properly in your business. The IRS and state agencies are really cracking down on this to get this right. And most of the time, the more advantageous strategy is to call someone a contractor. And that is more advantageous to both sides. And here's why. Because if you're on the employer side or the business that's hiring the worker, then you would not have to pay payroll taxes if the person was a contractor, whereas you would if they were an employee. And on the flip side, as the worker, you would then, now I know it may seem appealing for them to be an employee, but think about this. If you're a contractor, you can deduct your business expenses from the income you earn from that job. So it actually helps you lower your tax liability because it lowers your taxable income because you're going to take expenses out of what you earn. You cannot do that as an employee. So that is another big advantage. So what's happening in the world right now is we're seeing across the country over usage of the contractor classification. And states and federal agencies are cracking down on this by saying, hey, we're going to really examine this and see if you have an employee relationship. And it's really important to classify someone properly. And please document that. Document how you are classifying them and what reasons you're using. And we're going to go through exactly how to do that. What should you be thinking about? What should you be looking at and how to evaluate them? And spoiler alert, it's really based on the types of control that you have for each of these workers. So I want you to picture this. Okay. You just started seeing someone and your roommate asks you, so is that your boyfriend / girlfriend? I mean, it seems to be getting serious. You're like, no way, we're just friends. And they say, but their toothbrush is in the sink. They made you breakfast. They just booked a vacation for the two of you to go to Hawaii. Would you believe the argument about them being just friends, right? Would you agree that, yeah, that seems like just friends? No, that seems like they're actually getting pretty serious, right? And that's because actions speak louder than words. So no matter how many times that couple, and we've all met that couple, no matter how many times that couple says we are just friends, nah, there's something going on there. So that is what we call relationship control when it comes to business. Okay. What does the relationship appear to be based on the behavior and the apparent relationship between the two parties? Okay. So to demonstrate that you have a contractor relationship instead of an employee relationship, you want to show less control in general. And you want to make sure that there's a contract agreement in place that defines the relationship. Think about, if you watch Big Bang Theory, think about Sheldon Cooper's roommate agreement, right? How specific, how very clear, he could cite the clauses. You don't have to get that far, but you want to be super clear about what is our relationship? What are the expectations? Everything laid out there on paper. So there's no question that you guys have a contractor agreement. And you also want to make sure that you don't have any benefits going to the worker, because that would suggest employee. That would definitely be like you cooking them breakfast, the toothbrush in the sink. You want to show a distance. You want to show a bit of distance between you and the other business so that you're not giving the impression that this is someone who you're going to hang on to forever. And a big factor in this is whether the relationship appears to be permanent, and whether or not the services are a key part of the business. So like I mentioned with the spin instructor and spin studio, you want to distinguish what service are they providing and how does that relate to your overall service offering for your customers. So that is relationship control. Think of relationship control as how it looks to the outside party. Think about the toothbrush in the sink story, right? That's relationship control. Now let's talk about financial control. And I'm not talking about like, do you actually have financial control over them, like access to their bank accounts? No. What I'm talking about is, does the worker pay for their own tools and supplies? Okay. Are they paid an hourly wage or they paid a flat fee? Okay. And this is also why having that laid out in the contractor agreement is imperative. And here's another thing. Can the worker seek other opportunities to work elsewhere? So that can they work on your project as well as someone else's project simultaneously? Are they exclusively working with you, right? Are they dating other people? So you have to look at how dedicated are they to you. And here's another thing. Do you expect the worker to pay for their own expenses, or are you reimbursing them for expenses? Be careful with this one, because if you're reimbursing them for expenses, then that could give off the scent of an employee. But you want to specify that in the contractor agreement, because there are contractor agreements that do say we will pay X fee plus we will reimburse up to X amount in expenses. That's okay if it's part of the payment agreement. But if it's implicit that you're supposed to be paying for all the expenses, it definitely gives off the impression that this is an employee. Okay. So now let's go into the last level of control, which is behavioral. Okay. Now, this is the control that you have over when and how they work. So ask yourself this: would the worker be able to execute the job if I gave them little to no instruction about what I was looking for? Let's look at a home improvement contractor and use a very literal example here, right? If you hire someone to come over and reinstall windows, right? Install new windows, then you expect that when they get to your house, they will know what to do with the windows that are there, how to take them out, how to put in the new windows, right? How to align them, everything. You should not, as the homeowner, have to explain to them how to do the job. You should trust in the fact that, okay, I hired these window people, they know what they're doing. All I have to do is schedule a time for them to come out and they handle it, right? Think of it like that too. Are you giving a lot of direction to your contractor to the point where you're basically, directing everything that they do and offering them training, giving them resources, giving them everything they need to do the job? And this one is tricky. It's a little bit blurry because, of course, you have to give your contractors the tools to do the job too. But you really have to look at what are they bringing to the table for tools, supplies, and material versus you, and look at how that looks, right? So if needed, go back to your contract agreement and just understand what the expectations are, make sure it's written down, it's very clear, and that the behavioral control is limited. Now, let's use, for example, a podcast manager. So my podcast manager, Sid, and her team, who are listening to this right now, are editing this very episode, and they have their own process in how to do that, right? I don't dictate how they should do their job or what tools they should be using, right? They tell me, Shannon, this is where you upload the episode. Shannon, this is where you put this. And I follow suit. So they are 100% a contractor for my business. And if I hire another person to provide CFO services for my business, right? And keep in mind, I run a CFO business, right? So if I hire a CFO to work for me to serve my clients, then more than likely that person will end up being an employee. Why? Because they're going to serve my clients the way that I do in perpetuity. Like, I would not hire them just for a month or a couple months. I would want them to help me for months and months and maybe even years, right? So that will likely be an employee hire when that happens. So what will happen is you'll understand these relationships more as you start really building them, and you'll start seeing the different characteristics of each. Okay. The IRS actually has a checklist of questions that you can download, and you can walk through all of these different factors. You don't need to answer it like in one single direction across the board. So this isn't like those Cosmo quizzes where you're like, if it's mostly A, you're a contractor. If it's mostly B, you're an employee. No, it's not that literal. Unfortunately, it's very subjective, and you have to go through each of these factors. There's about 30 or so. And if you look at all of these factors, many of which I've described today on this episode, if you go through all of them, you'll realize that you're starting to sway one way or the other. And there are about 30 factors, but they're not treated equal. So one can really sway you. And it really depends on the overall story that you're painting in there. There isn't one that particularly trips it, right? So definitely take a look at that checklist, those list of questions. And you're going to want to really just dive into Is it really clear what I have as employees or contractors? And no matter the outcome, document your process to arrive at your conclusion. So if you need to create your own checklist or create your own set of questions that you ask yourself and you mark each of these people and say, this is where they land on the spectrum. And this is why I'm considering them to be contractors or I'm considering them to be employees. And in case you're ever questioned, that will be bulletproof documentation as to how you arrived at your conclusion. Even if the agencies don't agree with you, at least having that documentation helps you argue your case and can even sway them in the other direction or make it acceptable. Or they can lessen the penalty because you clearly put in the diligent work to come up with your answer. So it always pays to document. Now, what happens if you get this wrong? What happens if they show up, they're like, no, that's an employee. You classified them as a contractor and they slap you on the wrist, right? So if you misclassify someone who should be an employee and that you call them a contractor, you could end up owing the unpaid payroll taxes and receive penalties for them. And generally speaking, no promises here. If you make the switch and voluntarily report the change, the IRS does offer relief from the taxes owed in some cases. So understand that if you come clean, basically, if you admit, hey, I think I've been doing this wrong and I'd like to make it right, and I'd like to understand how I'm supposed to be doing it, and I can make a reclassification, they will 100% work with you. Just understand that you're not in trouble. They will work with you. This happens all the time. The only time people get caught off guard and that it gets a little bit messier is if they find you or someone reports you. Now, when it comes to state agencies, however, it can vary by state. So, for example, California came out with a rule last year that narrowed the definition of a contractor so tightly that it seems like everybody is an employee now. And state rules can be more strict. So you should be aware of what your state rules say and make sure that you're in line with both federal and state. So these are all my pieces of advice for you. If I want to recap this for you, you got your notepad, jot this down. Contractor, employee. Don't make your contractors breakfast. Don't let your contractor leave their toothbrush in the sink. So make sure you are keeping a distance from your contractors in terms of your business relationship. Make sure that you are documenting that relationship very clearly so that there is no confusion as to who you're working with. And absolutely make sure you're collecting those W-9s from your contractors. You've got a contractor agreement in place and that they are invoicing you for what you pay them. That's another big one to create distance. Make sure they are invoicing you because that will show that they are only getting paid when they send you an invoice or a bill. This isn't like a paycheck relationship where there's automatic payment, right? That they have to ask for money. So all of these things will help create the distance in your relationship and demonstrate that distance. And if you're listening to this podcast and you realize that someone you've been calling a contractor has been cooking you breakfast, you might just want to call it what it is, classify them as an employee, and go make those necessary changes. Now, if you need help with that, you can absolutely call us at Financial Solutions. You know that we're here to help you with all that kind of stuff. If it's overwhelming or if you're like, I don't know how to do that, I don't want to do that, that's what we're here for. But just know that, again, documentation is key and you've got this. You've 100% got this. Now that you understand the two different relationships, I think it's going to be super clear now who you're hiring and why. So again, thank you for listening to this week's episode. Please leave me a comment on Instagram, leave me a nice note and tag me if you had any great takeaways from this episode. Go ahead and show me your breakfast that your contractor cooked for you, and tag me in it. I would love it. So until the next episode, cheers, guys. Have a great week.